Perhaps you can give us your perspective. We have heard a whole host being discussed at a very high level in terms of how industry stakeholders are looking at what the situation is right now. We heard a little bit of on the ground level also from your colleagues over at Taveta as well as First Quantum Minerals. But speaking on behalf of your agency, what is your assessment of the situation at hand?
Right. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Thank you for having ZDA at this forum. So, to kickstart it, in terms of the general overview from the side of the ZDA, how are we looking at, what is our assessment of the aspect of skills in the critical raw materials or critical minerals aspect? First of all, I want to just stress the fact that yes, Zambia is so hugely gifted or blessed with these raw materials. They're so huge, they're so abundant, right? But also what is more important is the fact that we have the critical materials, the critical minerals, the critical raw materials in the country for various processes and aspects, not just in Zambia, but I think those that are very critical globally, and also when it comes to the green environment. You know, we can talk about especially the lithium, we can speak about the manganese. You will notice that actually the entire chain of raw materials is very available and abundantly so in Zambia. And you know that Zambia traditionally has been a copper mining country for over 100 years. We've been mining, extracting, processing copper largely. Of course, there are many other minerals, but I think that has been our traditional product as a country. So now with the coming on board of the critical minerals, especially with the green environment, you realize now that there's an urgent need to have a certain skill set. I think the previous speakers, the panel, and the other speakers that were giving us an overview did stretch this point to the fact that we are actually in a situation where we critically need skills that will rise to the occasion in terms of especially the, the green economy. When we speak about the CRM, supply chain, we can start with the downstream or the upstream, so to speak, and we speak about the extraction part of it. Again, I want to stress the fact that away from the traditional copper and to some extent cobalt that we've been extracting and processing, when we bring in other minerals, which we may not be so good at compared to copper, like lithium, right, and many others, the rare earth metals that Zambia has in abundance, you'll notice that we do have some skills, but I need to recognize that the skills are quite limited in terms of availability, because the potential is huge, to grow in this space. So we need skills to be able to come and do the extraction. So for example, from our perspective as Zambia Development Agency, I remember engaging with a certain Brazilian entity, that was trying to see how they could, participate in the Zambian skills space, right? So they were able to note that there was a certain level of skill that was missing in the Zambian space when it comes to critical minerals. So they are there, but I think what we need are the numbers, right? So we can move on down the entire chain, come to the logistics part of it, logistics management, transportation. Again, these critical materials, you agree with me that they are complicated. They rather the whole, chain, the whole aspect is quite complicated, and we need a higher notch, a higher level of skill, especially with the new trends in terms of technology and data management that is coming up to be able to manage, the logistics aspect of it.
Sure.
Talk about R&D also, very critical, and you agree with me again. I believe that we do have some level of capacity in our institutions. But again, I want to stress the point that our capacity is quite limited as a country, right, in terms of R&D. So whether it is the infrastructure to be able to carry out high-tech R&D in these critical minerals, we're quite limited. Else would have already been producing the EV batteries and the panels and so on.
Sure.
So there's a skills gap. We need to up our, we need to upskill in terms of you know, R&D. Talk about sustainability issues again, SDGs and all. Climate, right now as we are speaking, there's COP29 that is going on, focusing on the green economy. And I'm glad that the government is very focused on sustainability issues. The more reason why there is the whole lot of the Ministry of Green Economy that has been set up just to ensure that we comply with, or we up our game in terms of complying and you know, participating in what is expected by the global you know, market out there. So we can go on and on just speaking about some of the gaps that we have overall. But I also need to add that
before you do,
sure,
let's come to your addition in the second round. And thank you so much for also being very honest and painting a very full picture of the gaps. In as much as you have said, I mean, we can complain about them until the moon turns blue, but we're here to also talk about how we solve for them. But thank you for laying the framework. Fulano, maybe you can just give us your take here. I mean, Chimuka did mention a lot, not only about the skills, but also about challenges regarding making the supply chains a lot more sustainable, making reference to factors like ESG. What has your experience been, or what is your current experience, and how are you trying to solve for some of those setbacks?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Coming to riding on what my colleague has said here with regards to sustainability and ESGs. So with regards to green mining and green copper, that's the in thing that's there these days. It's come up with a lot of regulations.
Okay. Just hold on, can you hear him?
Oh, okay, let me put it closer to my mouth. Okay, so I was mentioning about the green mining, green copper, ESG, and the sustainability practices that have been put in place these days. They have come with a lot of regulations that, as the mining sector, we have to navigate. They are not very simple, they're quite complex, but we have to find a way in which we can actually navigate around them. Navigation around those regulations that have been set up basically goes around having a proper skill set as well. People who've got the know-how on how to go about complying with these regulations. The other point is, apart from the mine itself looking into green economy and green copper, it's also, the government has also put in place some factors that encourage mines to actually follow through and follow these regulations. So some of the things are like, we are party to some international agreements, something like the Paris Agreement, which actually does not force, but compels the government to enact and set carbon targets for themselves, which trickles down to the mines. So the operations now for the mines are actually affected, not in a bad way environmentally, but financially we're also impacted because of these regulations. And the other thing about the same green regulations is that they are fast evolving. If you do not keep track, or you're not on top of things, you can find that you're still implementing regulations that were 20 years back in regulation years, but might be like 6 months down the line. So we have to be on top of the game. Make sure all the regulations, you understand all the regulations, and evolve and adapt your operations according to the regulations that are put in place.
Sure. I think it also speaks to what we heard earlier on about the fact that the company bosses are also finding it a little bit difficult to implement some of these regulations at top level. It doesn't seem to be the fact that there's a lack of willingness to do so, but as you said, sometimes you get ready to implement, and as you're about to go, there's something that has changed in terms of the development, just given how quickly things are going. I'll come back to you just in terms of what you think about, you know, how that can be better addressed. But Sokwani, maybe to come to you, I mean, we've just gotten a view from Mopani Copper Mines about the space right now, describing the regulatory space as complex and difficult to keep up with. Speaking on behalf of other mining companies that are part of the chamber, how are you helping your member companies navigate these complex regulatory terrains?
Yeah, thanks very much, Fifi. It's, you know, you mentioned complexity at the end of the last session, and this is exactly what's been introduced, because in order to be perceived as compliant and to have full access to the market now, you have to handle the entire spectrum of ESG requirements, starting with how you source your raw material, if you're adding value, or if you are somebody that buys in from the market, starting from how you conduct yourself in terms of how you engage with your host community, right through to how you manage your tailings facilities because of the environmental risks around that. So it can be a bit overwhelming, and there's been a move, not just in the country, but regionally, under the Mining Industry Association of Southern Africa, to try and see if there was a framework which might be able to afford our members sight of all these risks. So we've been looking at the Towards Sustainable Mining framework under the Canadian Mining Association, because it has elements that cover all of these things. And we've been trying to see how we could domesticate these in each country under the association, of which Zambia is chair presently. So here in country, as a chamber, we have fora for sharing of best practice in CSR, in safety, health, and the environment, and everything else. But what we're trying to do is to see if we can take this as a kind of template which can give our members you know, a place to start when dealing with all of these things, in order to enable them be prepared for these compliance requirements that are coming at the back end of consumers who are demanding responsibly sourced materials. So we have some members who are already complying with a lot of these requirements, not just at the LME level, but you have a company like Mavisa Resources, who supply Bolide and Contec with their concentrate. It's a copper, cobalt, nickel, palladium, and sometimes platinum concentrate. And they have to therefore deal with the full gambit of hurdles or hoops which you must go through in order to access supply to the European Union. So we have one company that's heavily involved in the same. We also have Kajem. I know it's not a critical minerals company, but they have to comply with Kimberley process type compliances. And what all this does is affords access to markets, but perhaps more importantly is access to price premiums, which for us is a very key motivator. And if we, as the core industry, can attract the rest of the elements that the critical minerals value chain will attract, value addition downstream, for example, there's an added bonus for us as an industry in that a lot of the people that invest downstream also invest in mine development.
Sure.
So looking at it from that point of view, this stuff pays, and it's something that we need to get moving on quite quickly. And I think this is the year when you'll see the chamber moving most proactively in preparing its members for this new world that we're entering.
No, we'll be watching your space, and to the point of it paying, I imagine that you're talking about it not necessarily just from a bottom line, but also from a whole of society approach. We heard during our opening remarks how it was important to, you know, start doing away with some of the practices, particularly in the mining sector, that had resulted in exploitative practices, not only for people, but for the environment. And obviously conversations that we are having here are contributing to us changing the script? You mentioned downstream, and maybe, Ivy, it's a nice opportunity for you to come through here as a downstream player representing manufacturers in your industry. What is your experience presently right now in skills, availability, the lack thereof, of critical minerals, and also sustainability issues when it does come to adding value at the downstream level?
Thank you, Vivi. So thank you so much for making us part of this great conversation. Downstream manufacturers actually face a lot of obstacles when it comes to adding value. And the number one obstacle that I would like to highlight is access to raw materials. Access to the CRM is a bit of a challenge because most of the big mines pre-sale what they mine. It's just now that there's legislation being put in place to mandate the mines to reserve a fraction of what of their output for the locals, but that's a big challenge. The prices for the CRM again are set by the international markets. We're talking about the London Metal Exchange, where when they're setting these prices, they include costs such as logistics, shipping to the LME warehouse. And where the Zambian player, downstream SME, wants to acquire the CRM from the London Metal Exchange, for instance, they will be quoted based off of those prices that include costs and a shipping cost and logistical costs, which tends to be a bit pricey for just an SME to acquire. So access to raw materials is a bit of a challenge. The second challenge would be access to capital. Funding. Most of our SMEs do not have the resources, the funds to invest in value addition. You know, value addition in itself requires a substantial upfront capital for technology, for skilled labor that we've been talking about, for infrastructure, and they don't have the capacity to get those funds. Most of the SMEs often turn to our local institutions, the banks, and when they visit these institutions, they're faced with stringent credit requirements that tend to be too much for an SME, and they fail to acquire those funds. And if they're not faced with stringent credit requirements, oftentimes they find that most of the loans that they get have high interest rates or short tenures, which is not sustainable for an SME who's venturing into value addition. So that also is a challenge. And if you don't have funds, you're not going to invest in the right technology for you to add value to the CRMs. You're not going to have the skilled labor because we have CBU here. People want to be paid well if they've spent time in school. And if you don't have those funds, you won't be able to afford that as an SME. So that, again, affects the SMEs because they won't have the right skills, the right skilled labor to work in the in value addition processes. The other challenge that most colleagues have mentioned, I've talked about here, is the skills gap. So most of the times, our SMEs don't have the relevant skills that they need to process and refine the CRMs that we have. At times, it's the mismatch between the labor that is coming from our institutions and the industry requirements, and other times, just the SMEs themselves that do not have the relevant skills that they need to add value or process the CRMs. And the other barrier that I would like to highlight is regulatory and market barriers. I think Mr. Chilembo mentioned that right now there are certain standards that SMEs need, companies need to adhere to when it comes to value addition. We're talking about traceability. International standards require you to know, to keep records of where you're sourcing your raw materials from. We're talking about environmental stewardship, how you're keeping your processes, how environmentally sustainable they are. And most of our SMEs do not even have proper record-keeping systems for them to keep track of where they're sourcing their CRMs from. So that is also a challenge that our SMEs downstream manufacturers are facing.
Sure. And I'm wondering if maybe there's a missed opportunity in not having a financier or individuals from the banking community to just also give their say and their perspective of why it is lending towards players like yourselves perhaps is looked at differently, maybe on another occasion. But if we actually build on what is going on in the SME space, so you've spoken about downstream, but if we take it back to mining, Mr. Martford, sir, I know you have prepared a presentation for us, but I'm hoping that maybe you can just talk with us and just summarize as best as you can your experience representing the Association of Small Mine Workers, sir, and just where your areas of need are.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm presenting on behalf of the Federation of Small-Scale Mining. The Federation of Small-Scale Mining Association of Zambia is an umbrella board of all the associations in the country. It draws its membership from all the small-scale miners who are affiliated to the local associations. There has been a lot of issues with the small-scale miners. In fact, even those who are perceived to be illegal, they are also affiliated to us, whom we do assist them to formalize. That's the cardinal point. We do assist them to formalize. There's been a lot of gold rush in the country. Most of this gold rush is done by the artisanal illegal miners, whereby we have been going through the country with the Minister of Mines, whom they have been formalizing these illegal miners. In fact, the Minister of Mines has done about well over 500 licenses to the illegal miners. They are now formalized. But the only challenge that is there now is that, you see, formalization is not just a question of giving a license, no. There are certain conditions that are attached to the formalization itself. It's those conditions now which are having a problem. Because in those conditions, you cannot start mining until you do environmental project brief. Now we start environmental project brief. That is a problem to these artisanal scale miners, small scale miners. They have to engage a consultant. Now to engage a consultant is a lot of money actually. An artisanal cannot afford. You see? That's why I find that there's that now non-compliance. They cannot comply. Before they can start mining, you find that their license has already expired. That's where now illegal mining again comes in. Yes. And
so is that the biggest issue?
That's a very big challenge, actually. It's the compliance itself, because of the high fees that are charged by the consultants. On the training part of it, in fact, the small-scale miners, they have done, in fact, most of them are well-trained, actually. We have a program with ACP, EU Development Communities Program. They have been training the small-scale miners for quite some time, for the past 3 years. Actually, they have done quite a lot. In fact, they have been even training them over the, trying to do the EPB and some other training facilities like how to do bankable documents.
Sure.
How to do the access mining. The Minister of Mines has actually given us one young man, the Georges, who has been training the small-scale miners to do sustainable mining within their sites, mining sites. And again, you find that, within the small-scale miners, they have been having some workshops with the University of Zambia. They have been trained, actually, by University of Zambia.
Okay, so there's positive things happening to support the industry, but there is this big challenge that you're talking about regarding the consultants and the certification for environmental standards that's a bit of a challenge. Okay, we'll come back to you, sir. We'll come back to you. So just to also just now get the views of Namakau. Ma'am, I heard you rooting for your colleague at First Quantum Minerals with her achievement in the organization as well as the industry, but maybe you can speak more broadly about the experience of women in the space right now and where the areas of need in your view and the opportunities for them to come into the value chain in a more sustainable way are.
Thank you very much. But do I answer before I continue? Because there were questions.
Maybe let's just talk. Let's have a conversation. Yeah, let's just talk about the women now.
First of all, my name is Namakau Kaingu. I'm a Zambian. So some people think I'm a Nigerian, but I'm a Zambian.
But you're an African. It's okay.
I'm an African woman. I fit everywhere. I am the founder for Women in Mining. Women in Mining started in 1996 is when we formed the Women in Mining, and it was launched in Zambia in 1997. But I personally was the one that was running around from country to country to make sure that women get into the mining sector. Today, when you hear about Canadian women in mining, Australian women in mining, American women in mining, they even gave us tea at the University of Colorado. UK women in mining, the whole continent, Burkina Faso, Tanzania, everywhere. I've been everywhere to make sure women in mining, women get into the mining industry. From Zambia, I need the SADC, but I did the SADC region, but with the SADC, about 4 countries, we were supported by UNIFEM. UNIFEM was United Nations Development Fund for Women, which turned into the UN Women. And on that stage, I was selected to be advisor to the late Kofi Annan on women and small-scale mining. I was selected from 56 women in Africa.
Congratulations.
Who were taken to Legon University under United Nations University, which is based in Jordan, and then we were trained there, and from there Kofi Annan requested for our CVs, and among the whole continent, your mom here was picked to advise the Secretary General. Thank you so much. There's so much, but I'll just talk about that. So when you hear women in mining, just know that it started in Zambia, by your mama here. I have the vision, and I want to make sure, I have the vision, and I want to make sure the women get on in this sector, because I know that the women will take over the men. And I encourage the women to always follow the initials CCD, courage, confidence, and determination, and you'll break through.
Sure.
Because I had no mentor when I went into mining.
And I want to talk about when you started, because, and also the timeline that you have painted in terms of what you have done in your very full career. Because if we look at when you started and how long you have been activating and campaigning for women to have a greater slice in the mining value chain, as I said, then we were talking about different minerals. Today we're talking about the critical minerals. If we look at all that work and all the efforts and all the initiatives of women in mining that have come up around the world, and we also look at what the picture still looks like today of perhaps women not being at the table as much as they should be, it's a question to you on what you think can be done differently and by who this time around to ensure that as we progress in building this value chain that is sustainable, it is also inclusive and inclusive of women as well. Who needs to do what?
I think let me go through my notes. Everything is there.
Okay.
Everything that you're talking about is there. Yes, this is about the barriers. Women can play a key role in the supply chain for critical minerals, but they face challenges. One of the most significant barriers faced by women is their low level of literacy, education. And this I bring it to a woman, because many, many years ago, when a man and a woman had 3 children, the 3 children, maybe 2 males and 1 woman, 1 female, the 2 males will go to school. The female will stay in the house, waiting to be married. This is historically right. So you find that their education levels are low. But I congratulate them because they've moved to even give us engineers sitting there. The education system must be friendly to women and young girls. You know, early pregnancies, abuse of women, and their marginalization should be a thing of the past. But unfortunately, it's still happening because I've seen NGOCC crying over early child marriages and GBV. You know, women are more vulnerable and powerless because they have unequal access to information and technologies. Failure to access affordable financing, and they often do not own their own production tools. However, they play a critical role in the critical raw materials terms, but below are the challenges and, that women face. And then I'll give the recommendations, because I've already put them down.
Okay.
Representation. We are underrepresented in the supply chain management position. Just look at us here. We are 2, and there are how many? And even if you get in the room again, you'll see the same. But I'm so happy now that women are increasing. Yes, when I started the mining, every conference we start, there would be 2 or 3, and 50 men. So for me, I'm calling about the men. Please try and be gender sensitive and gender inclusive, because the women are there, and you need the women. I'm still coming on. Career opportunities. The survival rate for women in the critical mineral supply chain is minimal. Women leave the supply chain industry at a high rate, and there are few career opportunities. Why a high rate? Because they cannot afford to meet the conditions and requirements of the supply chain. So they go away, but they want to do that work. So, gender-based inequalities. Women are often concentrated in less profitable stages of the value chain. Women, if you go to maybe a gemstone mine or something like that, a lot of women will be there working, doing sorting and grading gemstones. In the gold extraction, the women will be in extraction, washing, sieving, drying, and packaging. And therefore, they are lowly paid because they are in those low-paying sections. Occupational health and safety. Women face unique occupational health and safety risks in the supply chain. They need to be trained. They need to have facilities like first aid. The women need potable water, you know, sanitation, the inhalation of the dust that the women work on, with babies on their backs. Some are suckling them, and their children are all over, working also child labor. So wherever you see women working, you know the child labor. You don't have to go anywhere, it's there. And then when they do that, they contract silicosis. This is one of the lung diseases. And thereafter they get TB. There's a program by the Global Fund, TB in the mining. But as I'm talking here, the women are not yet there. But we have started. We are going to work on that. Yes, we are going to work on that with the Ministry of Health.
Okay, okay.
Women, first, women face traditional discriminatory practices, but we pushed it aside. Because those days they used to say, when a woman gets into a pit, a very nice productive pit, when a woman gets there, all the minerals will disappear. And that's what they used to say, because they told me. And I said, for me, Mr. Chilembo, you know that? Yeah. Yes. And I told them, I said, me, I'm going in because this is my pit. I'm the one who started it. And then when the minerals are coming out. And I made sure that the women are going to follow because I'm doing it. Is it my time?
You know, we'll come back, and you know, thank you so much
Yes,
for...
we come back because I really want to bring this.
And
It's
I'm gonna
very
come back.
important for this session. It's very important because, madam, this talking and talking has been there for years. Like for me, I'm over 30 years in the mining industry. And I have my women that have been with me and the new ones that have been inspired by our work. But then all we are seeing again is the talking and talking. So allow me, after you do, when I come back, to finish.
Okay.
I beg you.
Okay.
Thank you.
First of all, just a note, your phones, please do use them. The hashtag LKDF Forum 2024, tweet and share the comments. There's very important information that's being shared here, and do feel free to share it with your community on social media. Just the silence, just so we don't miss out on any of the important speeches that we do here. And second of all, you have been active spectators so far for the bulk of the morning, and we're heading towards lunch. At this point in time, is there anyone who has a question or who would like to provide feedback based on what one of the two of the speakers did mention that captivated them? It's just an invitation for you to be part of the discussion at this stage, else we just continue. You have a question, ma'am. And, you know, briefly introduce yourself, and maybe if you can also, you know, hit your question as briefly as possible.
Thank you very much.
Can we get a mic to her just so we can hear?
My name's Engineer Taperewa Namwenga Kawe. I start with engineer to just show you that women are actually doing something about it. So I stand here representing an organization which is called Launcher Engineers Hub, but part of what we're trying to do is address the skills gap. So being a trained person in metallurgy, which primarily looks at extraction of these minerals, I find it very difficult to appreciate when you say there's a skills gap. Reason being, we're dealing with a vast number of students who've graduated and have got no jobs. We're also dealing with a vast number of students who want to, actually when I was looking at the critical, I was thinking that critical should have been put in front of skills, because it should have read critical skills. We do have the skills, but there is certain quality, certain critical skills that we don't have. We have trained people who can do those jobs, but they're not being given the platform for them to do those jobs. So it's not necessarily a question, but a contribution. I
Sure.
thought it's very important.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll talk more later. Thank you.
So I'm gonna pick on you, only because you represent some of the larger mining entities out there, and Fulano also, maybe if you can weigh in, because the argument that the engineer is making there is the fact that the skills are there, but then the support to perhaps integrate and align those skills to what you are needing are not there. So how do we bridge for that mismatch, in your view?
Thanks very much. This is why you heard Director Takaiza saying earlier on that working with industry, we've begun to create frameworks to identify these critical skills that are missing. Often, you will find that graduate level skills are plenty. People who can go into industry, be trained up, and become management trainees. But as a consequence of the stagnation of the industry going back decades and the way it's been sputtering up until about 2021, we've fallen behind in the application of new technology. And as a result, we ended up with a gap in the artisanal and operational space. So while the rest of the world moved into multi-skilling, where you have technologists who are familiar with your PLC controls, with actually servicing the machinery at the same time as they operate it, we were still very rigidly in our operating silos. So that is where we are seeing a lot of skills being imported to the detriment of our artisanal and technologist level skills. So it's something that some of our members are actively trying to address. I think before We go to Mopani because they're in the forefront of a very wide range of these areas. But even places like Luansha are investing in upskilling in that particular stratum, especially. Yeah, so I think that's probably the beginning of an answer for that, but I'd like for Mr. Fulano to come in as well.
All right.
Okay, I would just like to agree with what Mr. Chilembo has said. Yeah, there's a lot of graduates out there. There's a lot of skill that's out there. People have gone to school, have learned. But with the changes in time, I think maybe the curricula hasn't moved with time. So we find that what people have learned actually now and what is applicable now is a bit different. So that's the gap, I think, that's being referred to.
And thanks to the both of you for also being honest. I think the companies themselves were quite honest on maybe there was an element of sleeping at the wheel in not investing in the technology at a pace that was required, and now waking up to, oh, we need these skills, but they're not here presently. We have to import them. But it also does sound like that there is a recognition and there's a willingness to try and do something. So we'll come back to you. Oh, I think I'm afraid of your fire, but we'll come back for your truth. Yes.
Yeah, I'm very happy that we have got technologists here, ready here. But my own observation with the metallurgist, you see, a metallurgist is the one who knows all the mineral contents in that in each mineral. When they have processed at the far end, the metallurgist must know and put up a data of what has been produced. But we have never at all listened to any metallurgist to say, when this copper ore has been processed, these are the minerals that have come up. It has never happened. It's quite a disappointment with the metallurgists, what I can say. Very disappointing. You see, I've been in existence for quite some time now. I used to collect gold from ZCCM. There was ZCCM. We were collecting gold bars. After collection of gold bars from ZCCM, we were taken to Bank of Zambia. And at that point, there's no one who actually declared cobalt at that time. But there were metallurgists there until there was a certain man who actually, when they were exporting, discovered cobalt from ZCCM. Where were the metallurgists? Even up to now, I can't even tell you what we discovered. Recently, we discovered a lot of issues within the mining sector. Now, you metallurgists, you must be very, very observant. This is very serious, quite serious actually. It's
And
a
I
very
think
serious issue.
it is. And
There are a lot of rare earth minerals. Have you ever heard of Zambia producing some of these rare earth minerals? There's no record anywhere. You see, there's no record, and there's a lot of money being just going out like that through these mineral processing.
I think what you are exposing is maybe, or you're providing a lesson of how things can perhaps be done differently in future. You are exposing perhaps particular blind spots that maybe can be looked at more greatly in future without playing a blame game. Us acknowledging to say, okay, that might have been the case back then, but we have pulled up our socks right now. I see you're ready to talk. I'm going to come to you in just a moment. But any other questions or comments that want to be given? We've got a very active audience, so maybe they might actually have a question for you. So yes, sir. The man in the check blue shirt. Please, sir, constructive engagement.
Good afternoon.
Are we there yet?
Yes, my name is Edward Sakram from CPU. The issue of skills gap, I think we need to look at what happened during privatization of ZCCM. If you look at ZCCM, it had all the necessary skills to support the mining industry. But after privatization, we saw that the new owners probably were not interested. It's only this time maybe When we hear of, Mopani setting up a training school, or some other companies trying to do this hasn't been there from the time privatization came in. And that's why there is a big problem in terms of this skill set, okay? Then the other thing has to do with regulations, okay? Zambia Association of Manufacturers, they are complained about lack of, raw materials for them to add value. And again, you look at that, it's because maybe the regulation is weak. Why would ZAM face challenges to access just a ton of copper cathode to add value? Okay? It's because maybe there are probably agreements from these mining companies with off-takers somewhere that they should produce and take the stuff outside and forget about what is happening in Zambia. That's why ZAM is complaining like that. It's because regulation probably is not taking into account what is required to support the local industry. And not only that, the emerald industries, they are complaining about formalization, I know, things like that, and it's something which is affecting the country. Up to now, we have challenges. The people who are mining some of these raw materials, they are not trained, but there is no support in terms of formalization. We hope the government will look into that and ensure that there is proper formalization so that they can capture a lot of this production from the mining industry. I think our end here, there are just a lot of things we need to discuss here.
No, it's fine. We've got a full day, so we'll hear about them a little bit later. And I think I'll just be fair on that comment, just to also recognize that we do have representatives from the government who are in the room, and I'm hoping that you can actually take that feedback. There's questions around the manner in which privatization is done, and the manner in which, when private players come into the room, what kind of skills exchange happens after that. Perhaps that's feedback that can get taken back to the administration. Questions, once again, around off-take agreements, why IV doesn't have enough minerals and all of that to process. Again, that's something that I think that we can just respect our colleagues in government to take back. And even the formalization of the artisanal mining sector. So perhaps maybe towards the end of the day, if our speakers from government would like to address us on acknowledging it, that's fine. But thank you so much for raising those very valuable points. Okay, so there's a lady there with a question, and then I'll come to you, and then we'll come back to the panel.
Good afternoon. So my name is Mildred. I work with an NGO, Build It International. So we're into skills training for young men and young women in construction, and thank you very much for this opportunity. So just around skills gap, I think that's something that we also face in the construction industry. So one of the things that we've introduced in our training programs is what we call work placement program, where we work with the industry and they take on the people that we train for a period of time to just expose them maybe like to new technologies and the other things that are happening in the industry. So a question, maybe a contribution is with the sector themselves. How much are they willing to invest in terms of skills development? As an industry or as training institutions, there's only so much that we can do, and technology will continue to evolve. We may not be able to catch up with technology as it keeps happening, maybe every 6 months or so. Mm-hmm. So we need the industry itself to commit to supporting the skills development in either taking on trainees or students for work placement programs or attachments, and we also have work-based learning. So we need that commitment to come from the industry to support the training. That's my contribution.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely valuable contribution, and we'll get a response in just a short while. I just want to take the last question there for now, sir. He's looking at me like he wants to fire shots. So last question. Okay, you'll be the last question for now. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tandi Perry. I'm coming in from Mopani Copper Mines.
Fantastic. And maybe you can also pick up on the question regarding the budget allocated to skills.
Well, I sit under local enterprise.
Okay.
So I look at support to the local economy, our SMEs, our partners like the BMOs there, ZAM, as well as the mine supplier and contractors. But I just wanted to shed some light on our role as Mopani in terms of, and just to commend my colleague from supply department on the inputs that you've provided, but just a bit more on what we've done as Mopani when we've recognized at least around the gender gap. So when we're looking at our data, one of the things that we've recognized was the low participation of women suppliers and contractors. So we formed as of 2 years ago, formed the Women in Mining program. The Women in Mining program has 4 quadrants. It looks at the young girl, it looks at STEM subject uptake, and then it also looks at the SME and their participation in Mopani's supply chain, access to spend. Right now, we're looking at less than 5% of that spend. So we recognize the biggest thing for a lot of our suppliers and contractors. I'll actually speak about the other 2 quadrants before I go on to the next point. The other quadrant looks at professionals and the space that we operate in, the gender gap there, their access to information, the way they progress professionally. And then, of course, there's the 4th one, which looks at the youth, the young girls, and some of the skills development that we're looking at there. So we've created such a link with our training program, our training center, the Mopani Central Training, for access to skills with these groups of people. And what we've done when we set up the flagship Women in Mining Forum, we recognized that one of the things that a lot of our suppliers and contractor women-led companies was just lack of information, just not knowing our operations. There was just this black hole around how do you even access, how do you access an end user? How do you access understanding about what business is available? So, and I can actually see some of the women in the room that have attended our forums, which is quite exciting. So for me, I think one of the things that I would like to see is a lot more even private-to-private partnerships for such programs to become more sustainable. Because you see, there's an understanding that this is actually an ecosystem intervention that needs to happen. So it's not just a Mopani-driven intervention that needs to happen. We need to see the financial institutions coming on board to support this kind of thing. We need to see TVET-related institutions, including MCTC, of course, as well as others, to look at the skills gap. Okay. Because if we don't address some of these factors, we will have, like Madame was saying, a lot of talk shows, but no actual building of capacity within our women folk. And this talks about from the girl child all the way to the supplier and the professional.
Okay, no, thank you. I think we'll explore that idea, what you're talking about. Maybe it's not new, I'm sure, but we'll just hear what your colleagues in the room also have to say about greater private-to-private partnerships in the later session. So please, I'll come to you, and then I'll come back to the panel, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Nyambe, Copperbelt University. Do we understand what critical raw materials?
You mean what they are?
Yes, what they are.
Examples? Well,
from the beginning. I've been
From
here
the
since you started.
Okay.
Nobody actually introduced to say, what are these critical raw materials you are talking about?
But Antonio did. He spoke about...
Yes, because
okay,
there is a misinformation. Some people feel that copper is not a critical raw material. Some people feel that cobalt is not. Others think that it's only rare earth elements. So when you start a thing like this, first define
Prof,
the theme itself.
Can you define for us then?
Yes, you have to. And in short, what we need in this country is to have a skills like what you are doing here. What do you call yourself? Well, likely LKDF. What do you call yourself?
It's a learning and knowledge development facility.
Exactly. You have to have a facility to develop the skills in geology first, so that people can understand what are these raw materials that we are talking about, and what are the skills that we need for them to prosper in this country. So I can volunteer myself to come and give time to talk about what are the critical raw materials and what are they coming from? Are they new things? Or they have been there before? They have been there before. All these things have been there. It's the transition to energy that has created the word critical raw materials. Because people want to transit. They want to cool the earth. They want to go to heaven. Okay? And this is where it comes from. I volunteer myself to give the audience in Zambia what are these geological materials?
All right.
And where are they found?
All right.
Okay, because we seem to be missing that. There's a lot of misinformation.
Okay.
Okay, there are some of the minerals that you cannot call critical. There are some that you can call critical because of energy transition to these. Thank you very much. That's my contribution.
Prof, thank you so much. And, you know, bringing it back to basics for us. So we're hoping that we can hear from you again throughout the session. We thank you for being so attentive. In terms of that geology course or school you were talking about, the lady seated behind you, I would encourage you to maybe talk to her during the networking break. You come with some good ideas, and we can see what transpires from there. We have got 10 minutes to wrap up this session, and I think that it's only incumbent to come to you as we started to finish us off. Madam, I did say that I'd allow you to have your flowers and deliver the very important message that you have for us. I'll ask you to just lead us then in the concluding remarks.
Okay, I won't take long. I'll just be doing one by one. I recommend on behalf of the women in the mining industry that they should be gender inclusive policies, making mining laws and economic policies that are gender inclusive and gender sensitive. I'll give a small example. In 1935, the United Nations International Labour Organization, they put in Convention number 45, which deterred women from getting into mining, let alone underground. But myself, I made sure I went 4.5 kilometers in Dremfontein mine, gold mine in Johannesburg, because I wanted to make sure to know that if the women went underground, will they die? No. So now the UN ILO has, you know, removed this quietly or whatever, removed this law. And then the women came in a sector which was male historically dominated. So now I'm talking about these laws because I think governments should change and give and make laws that, you know, that support women. Because women were historically not, you know, allowed to get in the mine. And then they've got into the mining sector and they're doing wonders. Now men are following us. They're copying what we are doing because we are doing it safely and we know what we are doing and we care. Even the accidents, I think most of the ones that die, may their soul rest in peace, and I'm sorry, it shouldn't happen. But it's men, because we care. Why? Because we are mothers. So our coming into the sector, which was male-dominated for so many years, for us, we are doing it different.
Okay.
So we need these policies.
Okay.
Because 1935 today, and then the women come in, and then everybody is quiet. We are demanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then the other one is they should improve access to information. Ensure women have access to information, not just through male-dominated networks. And at times, they even forget them. They do forget them. Mr. Mumba, Federation, I have to remind them to say, why have we forgotten the women? You know, and then the other one is, provide training to the women, because this is a gap for them. Training to the women in such social-emotional skills like negotiation, problem solving, and personal initiative, so that the women are able to initiate things that they can do themselves.
It sounds like quite a long list, an important list, but if there was one that's most important that could change things immediately that you'd like to leave us with, ma'am, what would it be?
Change the policy and
gender-inclusive
rules
policy
and regulations that support women, because women were not there.
Okay.
Now they've come in.
Okay.
globally.
So we're gonna leave on that, and we're gonna
Yes,
focus
we
on
need
that,
that. We
for
need
now.
that.
Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much, Chimuku. Your final thoughts, sir, just in terms of how you are. You've heard the room, and you've gotten a sense of the temperature and what the sentiments are. Your just final thoughts on this matter, sir.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed, I was trying to follow quite closely a very interesting discourse that was coming from the audience, and I've taken note of some of them, and I think I'll just quickly try to respond in terms of my closing remarks. There was an aspect of a concern around policy, right, regulations and so on, and I want to bring it to the attention of the audience that the ZDA, part of the activities that we carry out is around advocacy for the investors, right? So we take note of some of the challenges, and we, in our discourse with various stakeholders, we try to bring it to the attention and try to advocate for the investors. Remember, we are mandated to speak on behalf of the investors. And also, it takes me to the other point that there's a very important structure that the government has put up called the PPDF, Public-Private Dialogue Forum, right? So matters of concern to investments and matters of concern to, which are just cross-cutting, are considered in this structure. It's a presidential structure, and they are considered at this structure. And so all the concerns, for example, I was hearing, including those about training, including those about skills gaps and gender issues and financing, everything has got a particular committee that can handle that particular issue. So, for example, if it is mining, if it is small scale, they can go through the chamber, through the relevant channels, and it will come to the attention of the PPDF. It will be deliberated upon, and government can reconsider policy in that regard. And lastly, I also wanted to add that we also participate in capacity building directly. We've got a Department of Business Development as ZDA, and we try to target more especially smaller institutions, SMEs. And I've heard from Madam Namakau here regarding the need to, say, train the women, to capacitate the women. And so ZDA does provide such services. And of course, you need to engage us, and then we can always discuss in terms of how we can provide that capacity building. So we do participate. Advocacy, private to private engagements which were being spoken about, we foster that as well through JVs that we try to promote as an institution.
Sure.
And of course, the capacity building aspect. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think that platforms like this are always beneficial in bringing to awareness in people's minds some of these services that entities provide that they may not be aware of, and they may not be aware of the additional ones at that. And thank you for extending the invitation to the audience. Ivy, your parting shot?
Okay, so in my concluding remarks, I would like to make mention that there are certain things that our association is doing to ensure that the downstream manufacturers remain competitive amidst the challenges that were highlighted earlier. And firstly, we do capacity building while we train our members to help them remain competitive in various skills. At times, we send out surveys to just ensure that we understand their requirements, where the gaps, the skills gaps are. I'll give an example of the recent training that we did just last month on export readiness, where we trained over 50 SMEs in partnership with the Canada Fund for Local Initiative to just help our local SMEs to remain competitive and be ready for the regional market. We also do policy advocacy. We try to lobby on behalf of our members, the SMEs, to ensure that if we're talking about importing machinery, maybe there are tax breaks, tax incentives to just encourage investments in that area. So there's an element of policy advocacy that we are so strong on. We also try to help connect our members' market linkages through the networking platforms that we have. We hold expos, we hold conferences. Just last month, September, we had the Mining Local Content Conference, where we brought together different mining houses and local manufacturers so that we can strengthen the linkages and the supply chains so that people can exchange ideas and collaborate on different projects and maybe come up with new products that can penetrate the international market. So we're doing a lot. Currently, we're working on a project with the European Union. What we're trying to help the artisanal miners to formalize their businesses. We know that mostly the artisanal miners are the ones that even source for these critical raw materials. So we're trying to help them formalize because most of them operate illegally. And this project is just helping formalize product development as well, and just to help them get their papers together. So Zambia is doing a lot. The CRM path is quite complex and challenging, but we realize that there are opportunities there with strategic investment, collaboration between different players in the supply chain. Zambia will be in a good place. We'll be able to export and grow our economy.
Fantastic. I like the positive note that you're leaving us on, and it is encouraging to hear how you as an organization are doing so much, notwithstanding some of the challenges that you highlighted in the beginning, from regulation to finance, that perhaps if solved could enable organizations at the downstream level like you to do a lot more. Mr. Mountford, sir, your final shot, and you have offended a lot of meteorologists. And one of them online is even saying, sir, that is it not that they are not consulted in the process, that they don't vocalize at an earlier time that there happens to be this mineral also available in this deposit, sir?
That is a very serious issue. Anyway, I would only one question.
Sure. You can't ask a question. You can't. Who's going to answer the
question?
A
question to the audience.
Okay, we'll park the
Yeah.
question. We'll answer it after the lunch break.
Sorry?
Continue, sir.
You see, Africa has got all minerals known to man on earth. That is a fact. But the question is, why is Africa so poor? Out of the 34 poorest countries in the world are in Africa. Why? I was in Senegal. We had a conference. One man said, one man from Europe, not from Africa, said, Africans are too good at talking, but why can't they do it? Those are the questions.
Who wants to do a PhD on that one? That means a serious... No, these are very important questions. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Fulano?
Thank you. I won't touch his subject.
Okay.
I'll talk about something else. So my last points are with regards to what everybody here, or most of part of the conversation has been about women, involvement of women in mining and these things. So as one of the requirements for ESG, basically, is a gender balance. So as a mine, as a mine, we are looking at gender balance by putting in programs, as my colleague had alluded to, Women in Mining, which focuses on empowering women, giving them an opportunity that they do not have in a male-dominated industry, and also giving them a chance and knowledge to actually actuate what they feel they can do in the mining industry. So as Mopani, we're trying to work towards that, and also promote sustainability and mine green copper.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. Last but not least, Mr. Sokwani, sir.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think if you hark back to my original comments, I explained why there's a need for a very broad framework, because mining covers so many different aspects and comes in so many different forms, even in the critical mineral space. When lithium and graphite begin to be exploited in country, they are likely to be more at the artisanal and small scale level to start. But most of the minerals that are going to make a very big impact economically are the base metals, as you've mentioned, copper, cobalt, and the other associated minerals. And it's only now that Zambia is in a place where we can say we're prepared to take advantage of the critical minerals opportunity driven by the green revolution, because a lot of what you are hearing are legacy issues that arise from a period of prolonged stagnation, which came about as a result of policy, legal, and regulatory instability going back decades. I think we are on the verge of being over that. And we are now into the phase of what I'd like to call the really boring back office work, which is around creating systems, creating frameworks, methodologies, through which we are going to effect our taking advantage of this opportunity in a sustainable and ethically consistent way, because it pays. You talked about the double bottom line earlier, you alluded to it. Yes, it does pay in cash, but in sustainability, it pays in that you have less residual legacy issues like this. You have less lingering feelings of not having benefited to the extent that you should. But to do that, we will need support from partners like those that have assisted in the creation of this platform, UNIDO. I've worked with them before in other spaces, and I think there are key interventions required at the level of within our industry value chain, assistance in establishing supplier development programs, which will enable more entrepreneurs in country take advantage of the opportunities that are available within the value chain, and also at the ecosystem level by coordinating with government to afford access to capital to our local mining entrepreneurs.
Sure.
And that's really where I'd like to stop, because if we prepare in that fashion, then we will see all the things that we would like.
I hope that your forecast is right about where we are right now and the change that is happening in terms of recognizing that this period of prolonged stagnation is not working for everyone, and that we are moving into a system of shared value. And I hope that it is a system that can happen when the likes of Mama are still alive, to say that, okay, all those years have actually amounted to something in terms of a tangible change.
It actually is, because the Public-Private Dialogue Forum, to which our colleague from ZDA referred, is working. Without it, we would still be very far from where we are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. On that positive note, we will conclude. Thank you so much. I think an applause from everyone, from the panel for such wonderful engagement from our audience, and from the audience for such wonderful engagement from the panel. And